They say nothing wounds like the words of your own blood, and on that cold morning, standing in the middle of my auto repair shop, with engine grease still fresh on my hands, I learned just how deep such wounds could cut. My name is Federico Manuel, 68 years old, owner and founder of Federico's Auto Works, a place I built bolt by bolt, brick by brick, with my own hands when I was still young enough to dream recklessly and old enough to work myself to the bone. I've spent 4 decades covered in soot, battling engines, lifting hoods, and fixing what others said was beyond repair. That garage was my cathedral, my testament, my legacy. The sun had barely cleared the frost on the windows when the clang of the shop door shattered the usual silence. I turned, and there he was. Noah, my only son. He walked in with the sort of confidence that didn't belong to someone who'd built nothing with his own hands. Aviator shades on despite the overcast skies, expensive sneakers that had never seen a day of labor, and that unmistakable expression I'd come to dread, smug, sharp-edged, and spoiled rotten. "Morning, pups," he said, not because he cared, but because it was easier than jumping straight to the point. "Morning," I grunted, placing a wrench on the steel bench beside me. "Didn't expect you so early." "I came straight here," he said, pulling off his sunglasses and sliding them into his shirt collar. "We need to talk." Whenever Noah said we, he meant you. And whenever he said talk, it meant give. "All right," I replied, wiping my hands on an old towel. "Talk." He didn't bother with pleasantries. "I need 25 grand. I blinked. "What for?" He crossed his arms. "It doesn't matter." "It does to me." Noah let out a breath that sounded more like a growl. "I've got things going on. Big things. Investments. It's temporary, all right? I just need the cash to what, Noah?" I cut in. "What is it this time? A car you can't afford? A crypto scheme? Or did one of your friends convince you to flip another condo in a market you know nothing about? You think I'm stupid? I think you're reckless." He took a step forward. "I'm your son." "You are," I agreed, "but that doesn't mean I owe you a blank check every time your world spins a little too fast." Silence. Then he chuckled low and bitter. "After your death, I'll inherit everything anyway. What's the difference if I use it now?" I didn't respond right away. The words didn't hit me like a slap. They didn't scream. They whispered, cold, slick, and venomous. They wrapped around my ribs and settled like frost on my bones. I stared at my son, and for a moment, I saw a stranger. "After my death?" I repeated. Noah seemed to realize he'd said too much. "I didn't mean it like that. You meant it exactly like that," I said quietly. "You look at me and see a clock ticking. A walking wallet with a bad back and a will you're waiting on." "That's not fair, no. What's not fair," I said, raising my voice now, "is that I've spent my life building this business, this home, a future I thought we could share, and you're counting the days until I'm gone." He rolled his eyes. "Don't be dramatic." I pointed toward the door. "Leave." "What?" I said leave. "You came for money. You won't find it here. You want your inheritance? Come get it when the time is right. But not before. Not like this." He opened his mouth, maybe to argue, maybe to plead, but I turned my back to him. The sound of the door slamming shut rang louder than a gunshot in the silence that followed. For a long time, I just stood there, the scent of motor oil, rubber, and betrayal lingering in the air. Later that day, I closed the shop early. Went home. The house was quiet, same as always since Maria passed 5 years ago. She'd have known how to talk to Noah, how to reach him. I never could. I raised him on hard lessons and quiet expectations. Maybe too hard, maybe too quiet. But I knew one thing, that morning was more than a quarrel. It was a fracture. I didn't know yet how deep it would run, or what it would take to heal. But I felt it. Something had shifted between us. And the worst was still ahead. The house was still. The kind of silence that doesn't soothe but weighs down, thick and accusing. I sat alone at the kitchen table, the same table where Maria once served sopa de ajo on rainy nights and where Noah once colored construction paper with stubby crayons. Now it was just me. A chipped ceramic mug sat half full of lukewarm coffee. And in front of me, an old leather-bound album I hadn't opened in years. I pulled it closer, fingers stiff from years of wrench work. The cover was worn smooth by time, the edges curled from use or neglect. Inside, the pages still clung to one another, and when I peeled them apart, memory stared back. There he was, Noah, 6 years old, missing 2 front teeth, grinning wide in front of his kindergarten classroom. He held a hand-painted poster that read, "My daddy fixes everything." I remembered that day. I'd left work early, even though the Camry on Lift 3 had a busted axle and 3 customers were already threatening to take their business elsewhere. But I made it. I always made it. Flipping through the pages, I saw the years pass in snapshots. School recitals I barely remember attending. Birthday cakes I paid for but didn't bake. Gifts I wrapped in haste, always trying to make up for something intangible, a presence that didn't weigh enough. I was there, yes. I was the provider. But being present isn't the same as being close. I stopped at a photo from his high school graduation. He wore his gown like armor, standing between Maria and me with a stiff smile. His eyes weren't full of pride. They were distant, focused on the future he was already planning without us. I remember that day too, the fight we had in the morning because I told him not to wear sneakers with the gown. "I'm not a kid anymore," he snapped. "I can wear what I want." He did, and I let him. My grip on discipline had always been shaky. Maria said I worked too much, that I tried to patch every wound with money, gifts, or distractions. I used to laugh it off. Better he has too much than too little, I'd say. She never agreed. And now, decades later, sitting alone with these albums, I wasn't laughing. I turned another page. There was the picture of his 16th birthday, the car keys in his hand, the silver Honda Civic in the driveway, gleaming under the afternoon sun. I remembered how proud I felt handing him those keys. He didn't have to work for it. Didn't even ask. I gave it to him before he could beg. It was easier that way. Always easier to give than to argue. I gave him everything. Paid for his college in full tuition, housing, food, beer money. Even sent him a new laptop his second semester because he complained the old one was too slow. When he came back for summer break, he had a tattoo on his shoulder, an expensive camera he barely used, and no summer job. "I'm taking time to recharge," he told me. I didn't argue. Just wrote another check. I looked down at the picture of him at 21 standing in front of the used BMW I'd bought him as a graduation present. He'd wanted a Tesla, but I told him those were too fragile, too expensive to maintain. "I don't need a spaceship," I said. "You need a car that can take a beating." He accepted it without thanks, only a nod. The keys dangled from his hand like a burden. I kept flipping, turning pages of a life I'd bankrolled. There were vacations. Trips he took with friends to Costa Rica, to Spain, to Aspen, all covered by my wallet. I never went. He never invited me. I was the ATM in the background, the invisible benefactor. I had thought I was doing right by him, making up for Maria's long hours at the clinic, for my own silence, for the fact that we lived in a modest home with noisy pipes and a view of the neighbor's fence instead of the sea. I gave him what I never had growing up: money, freedom, comfort. I wanted him to live without the kind of scraping and hustling that defined my youth. I thought I was breaking the cycle. Instead, I built a new one. I stared at the last page of the album, a recent photo. Noah at a company event. Glass of champagne in his hand, blazer too sharp for someone who doesn't know what a callus feels like. His hair styled, face expressionless. A stranger in a stranger's world. I closed the album. The leather cover felt heavier now, as if the years themselves had piled on top of it. Guilt mixed with something colder, the realization that what I had built, with all my good intentions, had failed. I thought back to this morning, to the words that echoed still, "After your death, I'll inherit everything anyway." That wasn't said by a son who feared losing a father. That was a man counting assets. A man who had been raised to see love in the shape of a check, who had never been told no with conviction, who didn't understand consequence because I had never demanded he face any. I rubbed my hands together. These old hands, rough and scarred, the same hands that had built an empire of steel and grease from nothing. I could rebuild engines blindfolded, diagnose a faulty transmission by ear. But I never figured out how to say the words a son needs to hear. "This is enough." You are not entitled. You will earn your place. I failed him. Or maybe I failed myself. I stood up and wandered into the garage. My real sanctuary. The walls lined with tools older than Noah himself. Everything here had a place. Every bolt had a purpose. I trusted the space more than I trusted my own blood. I sat down at the workbench and stared at the keys on the pegboard. One of them belonged to the old truck. The same one I drove when Noah was a boy. We used to take it fishing on weekends. He'd sit in the back, legs dangling, asking endless questions about stars, engines, clouds. Back then he was still mine. Back then he wasn't hollowed out by convenience. The thought sickened me. I wondered if all fathers reached this point, the intersection where guilt meets truth, where you realize your child has outgrown not just your guidance, but your values too. And maybe that's the part they never warn you about. You spend your youth struggling to give them everything, thinking it will make them stronger, safer, better. But in that comfort, something essential gets lost. Respect, gratitude, character. I thought I was setting him up for a better life. Instead, I'd created someone who looked me in the eye and counted my remaining years like chips on a poker table. I reached for another album, this one filled with Maria's handwriting. She'd captioned every photo with dates and notes. Noah's first time on a bike. First prize in science fair. Dad came late but made it in time for the photo. Even in her enthusiasm, the gaps were clear. I wasn't there as much as I should have been. Maybe that's why I gave so much. To quiet the voice that whispered, "You're missing it." But it wasn't just time I lost. It was connection. And now, staring down the tunnel of years, I wasn't even sure I liked the man my son had become. I loved him. But love doesn't cancel out disappointment. Doesn't erase the feeling that somewhere along the way, the bond frayed and snapped silently, like a belt giving out under strain. The guilt came in waves. I should have been tougher, more present. Should have made him work in the shop over summers. Should have made him earn that first car. Should have taught him that every dollar carries the weight of time spent and energy drained. But instead I gave. I filled his world with things. And now he stood on those things like they were owed to him. I leaned back in the chair. In the distance, the sound of traffic. Normal life, still going. But mine had slowed, narrowed to a room full of dusty memories and aching truths. When the front door opened that morning, I had expected another ordinary confrontation. But what I got was a glimpse of something raw, a man I raised and no longer recognized. I thought of calling him. I even reached for my phone. But what would I say? Sorry I failed you? Sorry I gave you too much? Sorry I didn't teach you how to live without taking? The truth was, I wasn't sorry for everything. I wasn't sorry for putting food on his plate, for paying his tuition, for buying him that first car. What I was sorry for was not making him earn any of it. And now? Now it was too late to raise him. But not too late to hold him accountable. Not too late to change how the story ends. Not too late to remind him that I am still alive. Still the man who built everything he wants to inherit. And that nothing would be handed over unless it was earned or taken. But if he thought I would go quietly into the night, just another signature on a will. He was wrong. It was a Tuesday. Late afternoon. The sky was the color of old tin and the shop smelled like motor oil and rain-damp cement. I had just finished replacing a timing belt on an ancient Ford Escape when my phone buzzed on the shelf. I wiped my hands and picked it up, expecting a message from a supplier or maybe an old friend checking in. Instead, it was Noah. I stared at his name for a long moment, thumb hovering above the screen. Part of me wanted to let it ring out. Let him stew in whatever half-hearted apology or twisted logic he was cooking up. But I answered. Yeah. There was a pause, then that voice I knew so well, smooth, too smooth, like he'd rehearsed it. Hey, Dad. Got a minute? I'm working. Yeah, I figured. Listen, I've been thinking. About the other day. About us. I said nothing. Let him fill the silence. I shouldn't have said what I said. About inheritance and all that. That wasn't fair. You're right to be pissed. I wasn't pissed, I said. I was disappointed. Another pause. I know. That's worse. A truck rumbled past the shop. The fluorescent lights above me buzzed faintly. I walked over to the bench and sat down on the worn stool. the phone still pressed to my ear. Noah continued. I want to make things right. I've been an idiot. Entitled. I get that now. And I don't want that to be our story, you know? I don't want us to end like this. I swallowed that mix of anger and ache. It was tempting, hearing him say it. Almost convincing. Go on, I said carefully. I was thinking, he said, his tone shifting into something softer, warmer, too warm. How about we take a trip? Just us. Like we used to. We never used to take trips. Okay, fair. But we can now. Let's go somewhere. Do something big. Something neither of us will forget. I narrowed my eyes. Where? Alaska. The word landed like a spark in dry grass. Alaska? Yeah, he said quickly. Mountains. Forest. Space to breathe. I saw this trail online, Resurrection Pass, I think it's called. Supposed to be incredible. Not too tough. We could hike it together. Camp out. Clear the air. A long silence stretched between us. I don't hike, I said finally. You used to take me camping. I used to take you fishing. You hated it. Come on, Dad. This is different. We're older. We can talk. Walk. Just reconnect. The word tasted sour coming from him. Reconnect. I looked down at my hands. Dirty nails. Grease in the creases. Hands that had built his world. Hands he now wanted to hold or twist. What's the catch? I asked flatly. No catch, he said too fast. I just want to spend some time with you. One-on-one. We can reset things. Reset. I wanted to believe him. Maybe it was genuine. Maybe he looked at his own life and seen the rot in it. Maybe he really wanted to make amends. But something in his voice didn't sit right. It was too prepared, too eager. Like he was offering me a role in a script he'd already written. Still, something stirred in me. A faint echo of the man I used to be. The father who had once wanted more than just obedience and civility from his son, who had wanted connection. Who's paying for it? I asked. I'll cover it, he said quickly. The flights. The gear. Everything. I've already looked into it. Of course he had. All you have to do is say yes. Say yes. Like it was that easy. Like everything could be undone with a plane ticket and some canned sincerity. But I thought about the photo albums. The decades of distance. The hollow man he'd become. And despite all that, or maybe because of it, I heard myself say, all right. Yeah. He sounded surprised. Really? Yeah. Let's do it. There was a beat of silence, then laughter, light, relieved, too clean. Awesome. That's awesome. I'll start booking everything. I'll send you a list of what to bring. Don't worry, I'll keep it light. I hung up soon after. He texted me within an hour with flight times, gear suggestions, a full itinerary. His efficiency was impressive. Alarming almost. Like the whole thing had been in motion before he ever called me. I stared at the screen, rereading his message. Gonna be a hell of a trip, Dad. You'll see. I didn't like how that sounded. That night, I stood in the hallway outside the spare bedroom and pulled down the duffel bag I hadn't touched since Maria died. Inside were old jackets, thick wool socks, a dented thermos. I laid them out on the bed like relics. Then I sat down and thought, what was I doing? Trusting him? Walking into the woods with a man who'd already tried to write me off, pack me away, spend my memory before it was even cold? Maybe I was a fool. Or maybe, somewhere under all the spite and self-interest, there was still something left of the boy who once climbed into my lap with a scraped knee and asked me to make it better. If there was even a chance, even a sliver, that I could find that boy again, I had to take it. Even if the road went through Alaska. Even if it meant hiking beside a stranger who shared my blood but not my values. I zipped the bag shut. And waited. We flew into Anchorage just past noon under a thin cloud cover that turned the mountains a dull, mournful gray. The air outside the terminal was cold, not biting, but different. Cleaner. It smelled like distance. Like things that lived far from roads and rules. Noah was all smiles. He wore a new fleece jacket, sleek hiking boots, mirrored sunglasses that made it impossible to read his eyes. He walked fast, spoke faster, always a few steps ahead, physically, mentally, emotionally. I got us a rental lined up, he said, thumbing his phone before I could ask. Full tank. four-wheel drive. Should get us through the gravel stretches near the trailhead. I followed him to the parking lot, pulling my old duffel bag behind me. He didn't offer to help. Didn't even glance back. I loaded it into the back of the SUV myself, a brand new Toyota 4Runner, silver, spotless. This is a bit much, I muttered as I settled into the passenger seat. Noah was already plugging his phone into the dash, checking maps. Better to be overprepared than stuck in a ditch, right? I didn't answer. I just watched the screen light up with the route, Anchorage to Hope, then onward toward the trail access near Cooper Landing. Resurrection Pass. 60 miles of wilderness. As we pulled out of the airport, he started chatting light stuff at first. Did you know Alaska's bigger than Texas, California, and Montana combined? No, and the park, Denali, 6 million acres. That's bigger than Massachusetts. He kept going. I read that grizzlies are more common around the Kenai Peninsula. They mostly stay away from trails, though, unless you leave food out. I turned and looked at him. What are you trying to tell me, Noah? He laughed a little too loud. Nothing. Just trivia. I did some reading. Trying to be a good guide. I looked out the window. Pine trees blurred past, tall and silent. The road curved through the base of the mountains like a thread laid carefully across a rumpled blanket. He was different. Not like when he called. Not like during that ugly scene in the shop. He was more composed now. Polished. Like he was playing a role. Every sentence was just right. Every stop planned. It wasn't natural. We pulled into a sporting goods store on the outskirts of Anchorage. Something local, no big brand logos. I figured we'd be grabbing some trail snacks, maybe a gas canister for the stove. Instead, Noah walked in with a list. 2 thermal sleeping bags, he said to the clerk before I could speak. 1 2-person tent. Bear spray. GPS transponder. Portable solar charger. And a satellite phone, just in case. I raised an eyebrow. A 2-person tent? Lighter to carry, he said without blinking. And it's warmer. Uh-huh. He paid in cash. Thick bills folded neatly from a jacket pocket. No conversation, no hesitation. As the clerk boxed up the gear, Noah stepped away, phone already pressed to his ear. Yeah, we landed. No, everything's smooth. Yep, picking up gear now. No, he doesn't suspect anything. I froze. He turned away quickly, pacing toward the entrance. I only caught snippets. End of the route, 4 days. I'll drop a pin. He won't. No, he won't. When he came back, he noticed me watching him. Work, he said. Just had to check in with a client. In Alaska? Time zones, he said, and smiled. He was lying. That much was clear. But about what, I didn't know yet. I didn't press, not then. I took the box of supplies, heavy with new gear, and carried it to the SUV. The rest of the day was a blur of small towns and winding roads. We passed through Hope in the late afternoon. Quiet place. Fewer than 200 people, most of them probably inside watching the clouds roll in. We stopped at a roadside diner. Noah barely touched his food. He spent most of the time texting under the table, glancing at me only when I didn't look away fast enough. So I said finally, wiping my mouth with a napkin, "What exactly made you pick this trail?" He looked up. "What do you mean?" "Alaska. Resurrection Pass. Remote. Isolated. Not exactly your scene." He shrugged. "Wanted something different. Something big. You know, for us. You're full of surprises." He smiled, the kind of smile that means drop it, and went back to poking at his salad. That night, we stayed in a cabin on the edge of Kenai Lake, not a hotel, but a private rental. Rustic enough to feel authentic, clean enough not to be a burden. He had booked it weeks in advance, he told me, just so we don't start the hike tired. I didn't sleep much. The mattress was soft, the room warm, but my thoughts were cold. He had a plan. He wasn't telling me what it was. And the worst part? He thought I was too old or too sentimental to notice. The next morning, we loaded up the SUV and headed out before sunrise. The road twisted through silent trees, past signs warning of moose and bears. The air was sharp. The silence between us sharper. As we neared the trailhead, Noah pulled out his phone again. Held it low. Whispered. "Location updated. Trail begins today, 4 days max. After that, clean, no trace. He ended the call as the trees parted and the parking area came into view. He turned to me and grinned. You ready? I nodded slowly. Oh, he added, reaching into the glove box, and here, got this for you. He handed me a brand new hunting knife in a leather sheath. Just in case, he said. I took it, held it, and smiled. Not because I was comforted, but because now I was sure. He wasn't just trying to reconnect. He was planning something bigger than he thought I could see. But I'd seen it, and I was going to play along. Because whatever he was planning, I had plans of my own. The ranger station stood at the edge of the wilderness like an afterthought. A squat timber building wrapped in green siding, its windows fogged, its porch scattered with boot marks and pine needles. 2 battered trucks sat out front, both caked in dirt. Behind the building, the forest rose thick, unmoving, ancient. Noah pulled the SUV into a gravel slot beside a battered Subaru. He cut the engine and turned to me. Ready to check in? I nodded, watching the mist crawl along the treetops. The quiet was total. No power lines. No traffic. Just wind and birds we hadn't seen. Inside, it smelled like wet wool and coffee. A pot was steaming on a dented stove in the corner. Maps lined the walls, annotated in red and yellow, routes traced and retraced by people who probably hadn't made it all the way. A tall man with a salt and pepper beard and a parka 2 sizes too big stood behind the desk. His name tag read Randall. He looked at us over the rims of his glasses. You're here for Resurrection Pass, he asked. Noah stepped forward with a practiced smile. That's right. 2 of us. For days. Light and fast. Randall didn't smile back. You've picked a hell of a time, he said, grabbing a clipboard. Trail's still wet from last week's snowmelt. Bears are up and about. He tapped a map pinned to the corkboard behind him. You'll want to stay on the main trail. Stay to the east where you can. Visibility's better. We're thinking of taking the side route through Juneau Creek, Noah said, pointing to a thin dotted line that snaked off into the western valleys, the remotest stretch, sparsely marked, winding through dense alpine woods. Randall looked at him flatly. You're not thinking, son. You're deciding. And I'm telling you that's a bad call. Noah blinked, caught off guard. Why? He asked with a practiced chuckle. You think we can't handle it? Randall didn't laugh. I think people underestimate how big it is out there. You get lost on the main trail, we can maybe find you. You get lost out on Juneau Creek, we're calling in body bags. I stepped forward. We'll stick to the main trail, I said quietly. We're not here to prove anything. Noah's jaw tightened. I'm just saying we might want to go where it's quieter. That's the point, right? Randall narrowed his eyes. It's all quiet out there. Too quiet sometimes. Radio doesn't work past the halfway point. You'll lose service 6 miles in. After that, it's you, the trail, and whatever decides to walk out in front of you. We've got bear spray, Noah said. Randall grunted. So did the last guy they found mauled up by Twin Lakes. That was 2 weeks ago. You've got it? Good. Keep it in your hand. Not your pack. He slid a form across the counter. Sign this. It logs your start time. You don't check in within 5 days. We send someone out. If weather permits. Noah signed quickly. I wrote my name slower. Randall watched me. You got experience outdoors? Military, I said. Infantry. Spent 2 years walking in terrain not unlike this. That seemed to shift his posture slightly. He nodded once. Then you know what it means to go silent. I do. Good. Then don't let your boy talk you into something stupid. Noah's smile froze in place. I'm standing right here. Glad to hear it, Randall said. I want you alive when you come back. We left the ranger station in silence. The gear was already packed. Noah locked the SUV and slung his pack over his shoulder with easy grace. He looked at me with a tight smile. You really played the soldier card back there. I was a soldier, I said. Yeah, 40 years ago. Still counts. He adjusted his strap. Look, Dad, I know you think I'm doing this to prove something, but I'm not. I just wanted time with you, away from all the noise. We started walking toward the trailhead. The gravel gave way to soft pine needles. The trees leaned in, tall and ancient, as if they were listening. You heard the ranger, I said. We stick to the main trail. Sure, he said. But his tone was all wrong. By noon, we were 6 miles in. The trees thickened, the air grew colder. Every hour or so, Noah would stop and pretend to check the GPS or adjust his bootlaces, but I could see he was texting or trying to. There was no signal, and that agitated him. He kept scanning the trees like he was waiting for something. The terrain got rougher. Narrow switchbacks, fallen trees, streams with icy water just deep enough to soak your socks. We reached a fork by late afternoon. The official trail turned gently east, wide and trodden, while a smaller path peeled away to the west, overgrown and shadowed. Barely marked. Noah paused. "This is it," he said. "No," I said immediately. "We stay on the trail." He didn't argue. Not out loud. But he looked westward too long. Too hard. It was in his eyes. He wasn't here to reconnect. He was leading me somewhere. And that path, the quiet one, the forgotten one, was where he planned to end it. The sky turned a deep slate gray as we reached a modest clearing near the edge of a still, dark lake. Pines crowded the space from every side, towering like the walls of a silent cathedral. The trail had grown quieter in the last 2 hours, no birds, no rustling, just the crunch of our boots and the occasional groan of Noah shifting his pack. He stopped at the clearing and dropped his gear like a man who had just finished a marathon. "This'll do," he said, trying to sound confident. "Good spot. Water nearby. Flat ground." It wasn't a bad site, but it wasn't ideal either. The lake was too close, risk of moisture and animals looking for a drink. But I didn't argue. Not yet. I was more interested in what he did next. Noah unzipped the tent bag and began laying out parts like he was assembling furniture from a manual he hadn't read. He spread the poles out unevenly, flipped the tent body upside down, then stared at it as if expecting it to put itself together. After 5 minutes of fiddling, he was already muttering, "Where the hell is this, stupid? You ever pitched a tent before?" I asked, kneeling beside the spot he'd chosen. "Of course I have," he said, too fast. "You think I've never camped?" I waited. He struggled with the poles another minute, then finally dropped them with a sigh and gave me a sheepish look. "Okay, fine. I watched a YouTube video. Once. I took over. Laid the vase flat, cleared the pine needles, and smoothed the soil before pegging the corners." He watched, arms crossed, rocking on his heels, pretending he wasn't embarrassed. The silence stretched. "This gear's good stuff," I said, not looking up. "You sure you didn't rent it?" "Nah," he replied. "Bought it all. We can use it again." I didn't answer that. We both knew we wouldn't. When the tent was up, I turned my attention to the stove. He'd picked a flashy titanium jetboil, lightweight and expensive, but fiddly in the wind. Took me 15 minutes and 2 matches to get the flame going. He didn't help. Just stood back, checking his phone like it might suddenly spring to life. "You know we've been out of signal for hours," I said. "Yeah, I know." "Have it." He pocketed it, then pulled it out again 30 seconds later. The sun dipped behind the pines and the cold came fast. I handed him a tin cup filled with rehydrated beef stew. He stirred it, then held it like it was just a hand warmer. Barely ate. We sat near the fire I'd built from gathered twigs and pine needles. He hadn't volunteered to help with that either. Just paced, watched the trees, occasionally stretching as if the motion could shake something loose from his shoulders. So, I said eventually, "You gonna tell me the real reason we're out here?" He looked at me startled. "What do you mean?" "This trip. You spring it on me last minute. You arrange every detail. Book the flights, pick the gear, choose the trail, rush us through check-in with the ranger." He hesitated. "I told you. I wanted time with you. You've had 35 years to ask for time with me." "Why no?" He looked away, tossed a stick into the fire. "I don't want things to end badly between us," he said finally. "I've been a shitty son." "I get that." I didn't speak. I just watched him, because something was off. He rubbed his hands together like someone buying time. I thought maybe we could reconnect. Away from everything. Reconnect in the middle of bear country, I said. At a time when the trails have flooded, the ranger says there's been a recent mauling, and the route you want is the most remote stretch. He forced a chuckle. "You make it sound like a hit job. Should I be worried?" He looked up sharply. No. Jesus, Dad. Then silence. He stood up, stretching, his shadow flickering in the firelight. I'll take first watch, he said casually. I blinked. Watch? Yeah, bears and stuff. You sleep. I'll keep an eye out. You're not a night person, I said slowly. Never were. You hated being alone in the dark. Remember when the power went out during that storm in '09? You cried in the pantry until your mother lit candles. He laughed nervously. That was then. I'm not a kid anymore. Still, he didn't meet my eyes. I didn't argue. I lay down in the tent, the zipper half closed, and pulled my coat around me. My knife, the one he'd given me, I kept tucked beside my thigh under the sleeping bag. Through the slit in the tent, I could see him. He stood about 10 feet from the fire, staring into the tree line. Not in the direction of sound. Not scanning. Not looking for danger. Looking for something. Or someone. He had that same tense posture I'd seen in men back in my army days, guys waiting for backup, eyes on the ridge, fingers twitching near their gear. He didn't move for nearly an hour. No patrol. No pacing. No yawning. Just standing. And every now and then, he pulled out the satellite phone and checked it like he was waiting for a signal that still hadn't come. At some point after midnight, he sat on a log and took out a folded piece of paper from his jacket. I couldn't see the details, only the shape of it, the way he turned it in his hands, studied it, folded it again, and tucked it away. A map? Instructions? Coordinates? I didn't know. But I knew one thing with certainty. This trip wasn't about reconnection. It was about location. About me. And I had a sinking feeling that in Noah's version of this story, I wasn't supposed to come home. I woke with the cold in my bones. Not just the chill of the morning air, but the kind of stillness that told me something was wrong. The fire had gone out. The tent was quiet. Too quiet. Noah was gone. I sat up slowly, my joints stiff and sore, and reached for my boots. They were there. So was my knife. But my pack, the one with my food, my water, and the map, was missing. I stepped out into the clearing. The tent was half collapsed, the stakes yanked out of the ground. Our gear was gone: stove, bear spray, sleeping bags. Even the trash we'd buried had been dug up and removed. The only thing left was my coat and a half-empty thermos. I scanned the clearing. Then I saw it, through the trees, about 50 yards off, the silver flash of the Forerunner. Parked by the narrow Ranger road we'd passed on the way in. The one that wasn't on any public map. Noah stood at the back of the SUV, lifting the last of the gear into the trunk. I stormed toward him, every step pounding against the frostbitten ground. What the hell are you doing? He didn't flinch. Just looked up, calm as if we were still in some city parking lot. Packing up, he said. You were supposed to be watching the camp. You took everything. He shut the trunk and leaned against it, folding his arms. I'm heading back. I stared at him, breath catching in my throat. Back? Yeah. And what about me? He was quiet for a long time. Then, you'll figure it out. I stood still, trying to make sense of the words. You're leaving me. Out here. He didn't speak. You brought me to the middle of Alaska, I said slowly, dragged me 6 miles into the forest, and now you're just leaving? He looked away. Noah. Still, he wouldn't meet my eyes. Noah, look at me. Finally, he did. And what I saw there chilled me more than the air ever could. Not anger. Not guilt. Resentment. Why? I asked. Tell me why. He shifted his weight. Because this is easier. Easier? You don't get it, do you? He said, voice low, steady. You've always made things harder than they needed to be. You cling to that old shop like it's holy ground. You've got money sitting there doing nothing. A house no one wants. A business no one cares about. You refuse to downsize, to retire, to hand over anything. Because it's mine, I snapped. I built it. For your future. My future doesn't need your greasy empire, he spat. It needs liquidity. Assets. I've got debts, investments, people I owe. So you kill your father? I'm not killing you, he said calmly. I'm leaving you in a national park. If you survive, great. If you don't, he shrugged. Nature took its course. You've lost your damn mind. No, he said. I finally figured out what you are, an anchor. You drag everything down. I gave you a chance to walk away from it all. You didn't take it. So what's the plan? I asked, stepping closer. You tell the cops I wandered off? Got confused? Fell into a ravine. He didn't answer, which told me everything I needed to know. You think they won't find out? No one's going to ask questions, he said flatly. You're an old man with a heart condition, miles from civilization. You've got no phone, no GPS, no one who expects to hear from you. I have friends, neighbors. And you're in Alaska, he said. Thousands of miles from them. You don't check in, it's chalked up to natural causes. A tragic accident. The kind that happens out here all the time. My blood turned to fire. You selfish little coward, I hissed. You think this makes you strong? You think it makes you clever? He walked to the driver's side and opened the door. I think it makes me free. You won't get away with this. He paused, looked over the roof of the car. I already have. He got in, turned the key. Don't do this, I said. He rolled the window down just a crack. I wish you to meet a bear, old man, he said coldly. Maybe that'll finally humble you. The tires crunched against gravel. The forest swallowed the sound. Then he was gone. I stood alone on the path, breath visible in the morning air. Then I turned back to the forest. Because I wasn't dead yet. The forest swallowed him, but not me. I stood there for a long time after the taillights disappeared, listening to the last echoes of the engine fade into the vast Alaskan silence. It wasn't just the quiet that pressed in, it was the knowledge. The full, unfiltered reality of where I stood. Miles into the wilderness, no food, no map, no clear trail, and a son who had decided I was worth more dead than alive. But I was not going to die here. Not like this. I turned from the empty trail and walked back into the trees, toward where we'd set up camp. The fire was out. A single scorched log still smoked weakly. The earth was blackened around it, soft enough for prints. I crouched, ignoring the protest of my knees, and studied the dirt. His boot marks were clear, leading toward the path, toward the vehicle. But mine? Mine would lead elsewhere. I scanned the forest canopy. The light was slanted now early morning. The sun had risen behind us on the way in, meaning the trail ran roughly southwest. If I turned east now and kept the sun on my left shoulder, I could circle back toward the ranger station. No direct trail, but terrain always tells a story. I moved. Slow, methodical. Every step calculated. Muscle memory kicked in habits from a lifelong past. My military training wasn't glamorous, but it had been drilled deep. Navigation, survival, resilience. Back then I was 21 and unbreakable. Now I was 68 and limping, but the fire inside me burned hotter than it had in years. I found a stream half a mile in cold, clear, fast-moving. No beaver activity, no dead animals upstream. I cupped my hands and drank, then splashed some on my face. It sharpened me, grounded me. Then I followed it. Waterways lead to people, eventually. Or at least to paths, hunting cabins, old ranger routes. My boots were worn but solid. My legs ached, but the motion helped. Anger was a good painkiller. So was the memory of Noah's face when he said, I already have. I walked for hours. Paused only to rest, crouch, listen. No bears. Yet, but the sun was dropping. I began to feel it, that old ache in the hip, the creeping burn in my lungs. My shoulders sagged under the coat I'd salvaged. The trees were endless. The silence louder than any battlefield I'd ever known. Still, I pressed on. Every time I felt the exhaustion rise, I pictured his face. His calm, unbothered look. That shrug. That goddamn smirk. The way he closed the door without hesitation. That was fuel. Better than food. Late afternoon came. My legs threatened to give out. I sat on a boulder by the stream, my breath loud in my ears. And then I heard it. Distant, faint, but unmistakable, the hum of engines. Not the low, guttural drone of a truck. Something lighter, faster. Quad bikes. Tourists. I forced myself to stand. My legs trembled. My hands were numb. But I moved. Stumbled through brush, branches scraping my arms, boots slipping on moss and roots. The sound grew louder, not in front of me, but to the northeast. I adjusted, angled toward it, and then, through a break in the trees, I saw them. 3 of them, young, loud, all wearing rental helmets and padded vests, pulling over on a wide dirt path with thick tire marks behind them. One was taking selfies. Another was laughing. I stepped out of the woods like a ghost. They froze. I must have looked wild, gray beard, dried blood on my cheek from a cut I hadn't noticed, eyes sunken from hunger and rage. "Help," I rasped. The tallest one dismounted. "Sir, are you okay?" I nodded once. "I need a ride." They didn't ask questions. 10 minutes later, I was on the back of one of the ATVs, wrapped in a spare jacket, wind in my face, the forest flying past. I didn't look back. Noah had left me to die. But I wasn't finished yet. The quad bikers dropped me at a gravel lot near the highway where a retired ranger outpost had been converted into a seasonal guide shack. It was there I met Oliver, who'd stopped by for a coffee and conversation with the kid manning the desk, just in time to see me stumble and looking like I'd been chewed up and spit out by the forest. In truth, I nearly had been. Oliver had the calm presence of someone who'd spent years reading both landscapes and people. As soon as I told him the outline of what had happened, he believed me. Not out of sympathy, but because the wilderness had taught him the things people were truly capable of. "Your son left you," he said, flatly, watching me like he was confirming it aloud for himself. He packed everything, drove away while I was asleep. Took my food, map, spray, everything. Said I'd figure it out. I stared into the black coffee he'd poured me. Said if I died, that was nature doing the work for him. Oliver didn't say, "I'm sorry." He said, "We need to move fast." We made it back to Kenai in just under 4 hours. Oliver's pickup was old. The heater wheezed like a dying animal, but it moved. We kept conversation to a minimum as we tore down roads slick with patches of snow and mud, the mountains disappearing behind a curtain of pines. He'd known an Anchorage-based attorney named Cassidy for 20 years, someone who had worked with state law enforcement and understood how to quietly build cases in advance of confrontation. He called her as we drove, explained the basics. She didn't ask for more proof than Oliver's word that I was lucid and telling the truth. When we reached the motel, I looked around the small, beige room I'd left 3 days earlier. My emergency bag, which I'd packed out of pure paranoia, was still under the bed. I hadn't told Noah about it. Inside were clean jeans, a sweatshirt, shaving tools, and my backup phone. I showered slowly, watching blackened pine pitch and old blood swirl down the drain. My shoulders ached. My hip throbbed. I was running on fumes and fury. By the time I emerged, Oliver had turned the motel room into a field office. A small GoPro sat mounted on a tripod facing the bed. A printer buzzed on the table. His laptop, open and connected to a monitor, displayed Cassidy's face. She looked like someone who knew how to turn a knife without spilling a drop. Mid-40s, sharp eyes, thick black glasses. She didn't smile when she saw me. "Mr. Manuel," she said. "We have some work to do. First, the statement." I sat in front of the camera and told the full story. Slowly, clearly, without dramatics. Cassidy guided me through the legal structure, intent, sequence, physical evidence, motive. I spoke of Noah's phone calls, the ranger's warnings, his refusal to stay on the main trail. I described the gear he brought and how he seemed more concerned with direction than experience. I detailed the moment I woke up to find myself alone. I quoted his words. "I wish you to meet a bear," I said, staring into the lens. Cassidy didn't flinch. I signed and dated the video at the end. Oliver, sitting just outside the camera's view, added his witness confirmation on audio. We stored the files on 3 separate flash drives and emailed encrypted copies to Cassidy's firm. Then came the will. Cassidy sent a revised draft to Oliver's laptop. I read every word twice before I signed. It was legally sound, cleanly written, and absolutely unambiguous. Noah Manuel was excluded from all inheritance, assets, accounts, and property claims. The house, the garage, the land, the accounts, everything was to be sold and liquidated. All proceeds were to be donated in full to the Kenai Youth Trade Foundation, an apprenticeship program for young mechanics and engineers from underfunded backgrounds. There was one final clause, which I added myself. In life, my son chose abandonment over responsibility. In death, I refuse to reward cowardice. The next generation will build with their hands, not steal with their names. Cassidy reviewed the additions, approved the language, and sent the final PDF. I printed, signed, and filmed the signature from 2 angles. Oliver stamped and witnessed the document as a legal observer. We sealed it in an envelope, marked the date, and stored it in the motel room safe. By the time we finished, the sky outside had turned to night. The heater hummed low. My body ached in every joint, but my mind was sharper than it had been in years. Oliver brewed a fresh pot of coffee while I cleaned my knife and checked the motel locks twice. We didn't talk much. There was nothing left to say, not until Noah walked through the door and found his father waiting in the room he thought would stay empty. The reckoning was coming, and this time, it would be mine to write. It was just past 7 in the evening when we heard the car pull in. Not a screech, not even hurried. Just the slow, confident crunch of tires over gravel. Oliver muted the television. I closed the file folder containing the signed documents and sat quietly at the edge of the motel bed. The GoPro was on. The room was still. So still that I could hear the keys jingling outside the door before the handle turned. Noah walked in like he owned the place. He was clean-shaven, wearing a fleece jacket zipped halfway, his sunglasses still perched on his forehead though the sun had set. His expression was a mix of faux panic and cocky relief, the kind of mask you wear when you're preparing to sell a story you've told yourself 100 times. "Hello," he called out. "Front desk said you checked in?" "I'm looking for my..." Then he saw me. He stopped mid-step, mid-sentence. His face froze. He didn't blink. Didn't breathe. For a full 3 seconds, he stood there with one foot inside the room, mouth open slightly, staring at the man who wasn't supposed to be alive. "Hello, Noah," I said, calmly. He closed the door behind him like a sleepwalker. Then he forced a smile. "You're here," he said softly. "I am. I don't understand. I went back for you. The trail, I thought you got lost. It's all on camera," Oliver said from the corner. Noah turned toward him, startled. "You're being recorded," I added. "Everything you say from this moment on is being captured. This is Oliver Jennings, former ranger. And the footage from last night includes your confession at the trailhead." Noah's eyes flicked to the GoPro, then to the folder on the table, then back to me. His smile collapsed. "What is this?" "It's what happens when you try to kill your own father," I said. He didn't try to deny it, not really. Maybe he knew he couldn't. Maybe he'd been rehearsing a story he no longer believed himself. But in that moment, the mask cracked and what lay beneath wasn't guilt or sorrow. It was rage. "You're going to ruin everything," he snapped. "You're going to burn down everything I've worked for. You haven't worked for anything," I said, rising to my feet. "You've taken. 4 decades. I gave you my name, my time, my sweat, my savings. I gave you everything I had, thinking one day you'd grow into something better. Instead, you left me to rot in the woods for money. You don't understand how deep I am," he started. "I do," I said. "That's why I've changed my will. Everything you were counting on, the house, the garage, the business, it's gone. All of it's going to charity." He laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. "You're bluffing. You're being filmed." He stepped forward, but Oliver blocked his path. Noah's confidence evaporated. He looked at the lens one more time, then at me. "Why couldn't you just die like you were supposed to?" I didn't answer. There was nothing left to say. The police arrived the next morning. Oliver had driven the video and signed affidavit to the sheriff's office hours earlier. Cassidy had already filed a digital complaint in Anchorage and contacted a local judge. When the officers came, they were calm, formal, and meticulous. One read from a clipboard while the other handcuffed Noah. "Mr. Noah Manuel, you are under arrest for attempted murder, abandonment, and criminal fraud." He didn't speak. As they led him from the motel lobby, I watched him go, shoulders hunched, jaw set, eyes dead. There was no shock anymore, no panic, just defeat. He hadn't just lost his father. He'd lost himself. The case made news in quiet circles, Alaskan inheritance scheme, they called it. Cassidy handled everything. There were no drawn-out hearings. Just documents, statements, and a simple sentence delivered quietly in a courthouse 2 towns over. I didn't attend. I didn't need to. Instead, I began to rebuild. Over the next year, I dissolved the business, not because it was a failure, but because it needed to end. The garage had become a monument to an old dream. I sold the land, the tools, and the building to a local charity that trained young mechanics. Kids with no fathers, no safety nets. Kids who knew how to work. The money from the house went into the Kenai Youth Trade Foundation. Scholarships, equipment, instructor salaries. I helped organize the first round of classes. Taught a few lessons myself. I wasn't a natural teacher, but I was honest and they listened. I found meaning in that. Not the loud, dramatic kind. The quiet kind. The kind that builds slowly, like a new wall laid brick by brick. The kind my son had never been willing to understand. The last time I heard from Noah was a letter written from a correctional program somewhere upstate. It was short. Not angry. Not remorseful. Just empty. He asked for a second chance. I didn't answer, not out of hatred, but because I'd given him too many chances already. My second chance had come in the form of a mistake he made, the mistake of thinking I was weak, that I was finished. But I wasn't, not yet.